Hey, fifth grade, for today's Writer's Workshop mini lesson, we're going to be talking about the qualities of ineffective and effective memoirs. This is part 2 of this mini lesson. Yesterday, we took a look at this bad on purpose memoir written by Mrs. Atwell. She did this poorly and wrote this memoir in the weakest way so that we could benefit and learn from her mistakes. So we like to say in writing, growth is slow, and sometimes we have to be bad at something before we can be good at it. This memoir certainly proved that. Then we took a look at all of the things that weren't working in that memoir, and we created a list. That list can be found on page 23 of your ELA reference folder. So it's really important as we begin this genre of writing that you make sure that these things are not happening in your memoir. However, today we're going to shift gears and we're going to look at her best on purpose memoir. Okay, so this is the real memoir, not the bad on purpose one that we can learn from. Now, we can learn from this one too, but the things we're going to learn from this one are the things that we should do in our memoirs, that we should replicate because they work, and good readers, intelligent readers, need these things to happen in order for them to follow the story that we're sharing with them, or in this case, the memory. So follow along with me as I read through this. It's a little lengthy, but I promise it's worth it, and I think it perfectly illustrates exactly what a good memoir should do, and that is to bring a memory to life for your reader and to allow them to experience that memory with you. So I think you'll see that she did that here. Follow along with me. 2 lies. What is that on your dress? I looked up into my mother's gray eyes. What do you mean? I mean the pink stuff all over the dress. I spent 45 minutes ironing. She sputtered. I looked down and took a deep breath. Could I do it? Could I tell her the lie? That morning at nap time, curled upon my kindergarten mat, I had spied a prize on the classroom floor, an exquisite lump of pink clay. I remembered how much fun it had been to stretch, pound, and eat clay at art time. Now I considered how much fun it would be to flatten out that lump. But on what? I looked around. There was my mat, too sticky. There was the floor, too dirty. And there was my dress. I spread the skirt of the dress on the mat. I smoothed the material and started kneading the clay. By the time the boy who was the nap fairy came along to tap me with the nap wand and tell me I could get up, the skirt of my yellow dress had turned pink. I was wearing the lump of clay as I rolled up my mat. The realization of what I had just done began to dawn. My mother was going to be upset with me. No, my mother was going to be mad at me. No, my mother was going to kill me. I grew up in a house where the refrigerator was full of damp, rolled up clothes lying in wait in plastic bags for my angry mother to shake out and use for target practice with her iron. The dresses I wore to school, back then it was a federal statute or something that girls had to wear dresses to school, were smocked, sashed, and splashed with ribbons and lace. I think they must have been a mother's nightmare. Once my mother had ironed one of those suckers, I wore it until it was soiled. Then she opened the refrigerator, and Glenn, Bonnie, and I ran and hid in our bedrooms until the fit of ironing had passed. On the way home from kindergarten, I stared at my reflection in the window of the bus, ignored my friends and the laughter and singing around me, and worried. What would my mother say? Worse, what would she do? My mother was a spanker and a screamer. I could feel the spanks and hear the screams. Suddenly, I sat up. Of course. Why hadn't it occurred to me before? When my mother asked about the clay on my dress, I would lie. Yeah, lie. I'd heard about lying. People did it all the time. I'd just make up a story. What a relief! For the rest of the ride home, I invented and polished the lie. When the bus pulled up at the end of our driveway, I jumped down the steps, skipped up to our porch, burst through the back door, and yelled, "Mommy, I'm home!" When she saw the dress, which she did immediately, and asked me about it, which came next, I took a deep breath and I lied. See, at nap time, this boy who was on the mat next to me found a ball of clay and he picked it up and he rolled it right all over my dress. What? My mother asked. At nap time, this boy who was on the mat next to me found a ball of clay and he picked it up and he rolled it all over my dress. Uh-huh. I think I'd better call Mrs. Brown and have a little talk with her about this boy. Or maybe I'll call his mother and have a little talk with her. What's his name? I began to lose confidence. A name? A name hadn't been part of the plan. Frantically, I cast around for a boy's name. A boy, a boy. Did I know any boys? I blurted out the only name I could think of. Glenn! It was Glenn! Glenn was a boy's name. Unfortunately, it was also my brother's name. I could tell by the look on her face that the coincidence was proving too much for my mother. She pinched her lips together and gripped my shoulders. I cringed and felt the tears begin. Her hands rested on my shoulders. I could feel her looking at me, but I was afraid to meet her gaze. I stared at our shoes. A silence of a few seconds stretched for an eternity. Suddenly, she released me. "Change your clothes and go outside and play," she sighed. What? Go on. Put on your play clothes. I stumbled into the bedroom, stepped out of the dress, and pulled on a t-shirt and pants. In half a minute, I was standing in our fenced-in backyard alone and as confused as I had ever been in my whole life. Where were the screaming and the spanking? It's not that I missed them. I missed the certainty of crime and punishment, of the way things were supposed to happen at my house. Why was my mother not acting like my mother? She didn't mention the dress when my father came home from work, or at dinner, or the next day, or ever. In fact, I never saw that yellow dress again. It was a mystery I couldn't solve until the day my daughter came home from kindergarten and lied to me for the first time. A small, dumb lie that I saw right through. Anne cried, and we talked about why she had lied to me. "Because I was afraid of what you'd do if I told the truth," she sobbed. My heart sank. Anne was afraid of me. Me, her mother, who loved her more than anything. We talked until she understood I wasn't angry and her tears had dried. Then she went off to play, and I began to chop the vegetables for dinner. Standing over the cutting board in the late afternoon light, I remembered my first lie and its mysterious resolution. And I understood power. Parents have so much of it. We're the monarchs of our children's worlds. I want my child to respect my power, to let me show her how to be honest, kind, civil, and safe. But I don't want her to fear it, fear me. Maybe the angry queen of my childhood didn't always enjoy her power either. Maybe, on a fall day 45 years ago, she looked through her daughter's tears and in the first lie felt the fear of mom. Maybe her heart sank too. Okay, so that memoir that we just read was drastically different from the very first Bad on Purpose memoir we read. So let's talk about what does work in this memoir, the difference between the two, and just kind of what qualities that this memoir actually possessed. By the way, this can be found on page 23 of your ELA reference folder also. So you'll have the qualities of an ineffective memoir at the top, and then these qualities of a memoir that work, an effective memoir, at the bottom of that page. So page 23. The title invites and fits. It came last. It was chosen from among possibilities that the writer brainstormed. Remember, this was called Two Lies, not the first time I ever told a lie to my mother. The lead brings readers right into the action of the story. If we look at the way this one starts, it starts with dialogue. There's no background information, no who, what, when, where, none of that. Okay, she starts right inside the experience, and then she fills in the details for us as we go. Kind of, she takes us along through that memory. Okay, but we actually start right inside the memory. And if you noticed, there's a flashback here because it starts with her conversation with her mother, and then she flashes back to what actually happened. She fills us, the reader, in as she goes, but she draws us in with that dialogue and with that action piece of the conversation with her mother when she thinks she's going to be in so much trouble. The background information that a reader needs is woven in. So like I told you, the who, what, when, where, why context is embedded in the narrative. So she kind of like gives that to us a little bit at a time as she continues to tell the story. There's a lot of I, lots of thoughts, lots of feelings and observations of the memoirist. So when I say there's a lot of I don't mean that there's a million of the personal pronoun I throughout the piece. Although, I mean, it's told from her perspective, so you're going to see those, and there will be probably quite a few. The biggest part that lets us, or the biggest thing that I want you to understand here, or the thing that I want you to latch on to, is that because she is telling the story, yes, there are going to be I's in it, but her thoughts, her feelings, her observations, we're getting to hear her thoughts. We're getting to see what she saw. We're getting to feel what she felt and notice what she noticed because she takes us along the way and she shares those things with us. The pace is slowed down. Readers can make a movie in their minds. The other memoir just moved too fast. It was over before we could really even get into it, okay? A good memoir good memoirist considers the pacing of the information that they're giving to the reader. So it was slowed down, and there was enough detail there that we could picture it in our mind. We could hear and see and experience everything that she's describing. And that brings me to the next one. A reader can see, hear, and feel the experience because the writer provides concrete sensory details and descriptions of people in action. The small details show what matters to the people in the memoir. We call this a tone, okay? Or, yeah, a tone. And you can tell how the person writing feels about certain things based on the tone that they're using. So because of the small details, we're able to pick up a little bit of Mrs. Atwell's tone towards her mother and towards her daughter and certain things throughout because of those small details. There's dialogue. So the writer uses it to show what people are like and how they're feeling. One of my very favorite parts about this memoir is the conversation, because if you listen to me read it, I had a mom voice and I had a scared little kindergarten voice. And I was able to do that because those clues were there. She included dialogue, what people were saying to each other, because that's how we experience life, isn't it? We have conversations with the people in our lives. And so this time is no different. I mean, she came home, she had clay all over her dress. It's very natural, and we would expect a mother to be like, what happened? And there would be some mom tone in there. And there'd probably be some body language too, and you can see that as well. And she would be scared and nervous to tell this lie, and so we see that in her body language, and we hear it in the voice where she responds to the mom. So the dialogue is the conversation between the mom and the young, very young Mrs. Atwell. However, it brings the memory to life because we get to be there. We get to hear her as a little girl, and we get to hear mom as someone who wants to know why that dress that was yellow when she went to school is now pink. The language is interesting. Verbs like sputter, knead, spy, curl, polish, pinch, and grip that a reader can see, feel, and hear. The ending is purposeful. It leaves the reader thinking. There's a so what, a meaning or a significance that was discovered by the memoirist during the act of writing the memoir. We talked about this during our unit on free verse poetry. Sometimes when we begin writing a piece, we don't know what our so what is. And it's very important that we get to the bottom of that, or that we answer that question for ourselves, because if we don't know why we're writing the poem or what the central idea is, the reader's not going to know either. But sometimes the act of writing helps us reveal why this event or why this topic is significant to us, why our heart hung on to it, or why our mind has never forgotten it. And a lot of times it's usually attached to a very strong emotion or multiple emotions and senses. So in this particular memoir, she discovered her so what, but she didn't really discover it until she was a mom herself. So through the process of writing this memoir and reflecting on her childhood, but then in contrast reflecting on her daughter's childhood and the situations that they encountered when she was in kindergarten, she has then discovered her so what. And that was the power of the mom, and what moms want for their children and what they don't want, and why she actually did get sent outside to play with no punishment or screaming or spanking. There's a setting, there's a time and a place and places. This memoir starts out at home, getting off the bus, or not getting off the bus. It starts in the home, having that conversation with her mom. Then we flash back to school, and then we flash forward to the bus ride, and then we flash even more forward to her coming up the steps and walking in, and her mother then saying, "What is that?" Okay, so there's time and there are places. The action flashes back and forward in time and creates questions in the reader's mind about what will happen next. The memoirist invented details that fit with the spirit, intention, and truth of the story. So, I think we can all agree that this was very well done and much better than the first one we read. Again, this list of qualities that work in that memoir can be found on page 23 of your ELA reference folder. You should know that Mrs. Atwell can't remember the exact words her mother spoke to her when she was 5, or that she spoke to her. She thought her dress was yellow, but she can't be sure about that either. Maybe the nap fairy wasn't a kindergarten thing, but came about in first grade. The point is that a memoir is not a reportage. It's not a news report. It's not a fact-finding mission. As a memoirist, you get to craft your impressions of the events in your life, which means you get to invent a little bit. Okay? So you just stay true to the essence of your memory. And if it's not exactly what happened, if you're not completely sure, you don't have to research it out. You don't have to conduct a personal interview with someone who was there to find out exactly what was said and how it was said. You can kind of run with that as a writer. You can invent details that, like I said, stay true to your memory. Okay? A memoir is how one remembers one's own life, while an autobiography is history requiring research, dates, facts, double checked. This is a quote by Gore Vidal, and this is so, so true. This is not a research project. This is you bringing one of your memories to life for your reader and inventing where you need to invent and bringing the lessons learned and the experiences shared to whoever it is that's reading your memoir. Okay? It's not a nonfiction piece, although it is a nonfiction piece, but we don't want it to read like nonfiction. We want it to read like really great fiction. We want to invite the reader in and we want them to be captivated from the first moment they lay eyes on it. The story of your life is not your life. It's your story. Again, we want it to be nonfiction, but we want it to read like fiction. Don't be reluctant to invent as you craft a memoir. So long as you stay true to the essence of the experience, you've named the qualities to shoot for in your own memoirs, and naming is the first step of owning. I'm excited to read your memoirs as you work to bring these qualities to your writing, and I'm eager to begin teaching you lessons about them. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. I love and miss you. I know that was a long one, but I promise it's going to be worth it. I can't wait to see you soon. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything at all. Bye.